The Great War of 1914 to 1918 is full of memorable battles. With the influx of games like Hearts of Iron or Total War, it allows us to reshape the course of the war to our wishes. In this film, I'll present to you a battle that took place in my Belgian campaign in the Great War mod for Napoleon Total War. What led to the battle, who fought in it, and what made it so impactful? Let's find out together in this Total War narrative for the Battle of Brussels. November 1915. Europe is in the grips of the most destructive war yet known, World War I. On the Western Front, a Franco-Belgian force turned back the German invasion of Belgium last year. Now the two countries launched their own attack on Germany itself. Alsace-Lorraine, the Rhineland, and Hanover have all fallen. In December, the town of Oldenburg was now besieged. In the midst of a snowstorm, Belgian armies under General Lehmann defeated 12,000 Germans and captured their city, but at a horrendous cost. Germany's situation was grim. They needed a decisive turn in the war, quickly. The German army was spent and required time to replenish before launching an offensive. So they turned to Austria to mobilize forces on the Western Front and bring the war to the Allies. The Austrian offensive of February 1916 was led by two armies, commanded by George Marek and Michael Bielstein.
You think what you're doing is right, but it's not. You are a sick man.
They planned to advance into the rear of the Allied offensive and capture Brussels, cutting off supplies and reinforcements, forcing them to abandon their advance on Germany. The first sighting of Austrian armies were near Frankfurt. Lehmann, stationed in Oldenburg, marched south to defend the Rhineland. In a surprise maneuver, the Austrians moved across the Rhine, bypassing Alsace-Lorraine. The Germans then retook Hanover, which was held by a small French garrison. On the east bank of the Rhine, General Leonhard Hertz, commanding 20,000 relatively fresh German troops, formed the rearguard. As Lehmann's armies were sighted, Hertz issued an attack, but having minimal artillery support, his division was repulsed. But he distracted the Allies enough for Marek's armies to reach Luxembourg. The speed of the Austrian offensive took the Allies by surprise. When they realized the Austrian plans, it began moving west. The Austrians had pillaged Liège, then encroached on Brussels. Chief of Police General Barbiers was in charge of the city's defenses, but have done little. The garrison totaled 12,000 men against 140,000 Austrians. Brussels would have to be rescued by outside Franco-Belgian armies, with the fate of the Western Front at stake. To the south, French armies under Rousseau and Vauban were converging on Brussels. General Lehmann's Army of Belgium was the last to arrive to the city, which was now besieged. In total, the Allies had fielded an army of 220,000 men, with France supplying the bulk of the troops. The Austrians were outnumbered, almost 2-1. In a risky gamble, Barbiers detached his artillery under Commander Schuhaven to sneak behind enemy lines to join up with Lehmann's army. But when Lehmann made preparations for an attack, it was Schuhaven's artillery that first encountered the Austrian army. In the afternoon of May, scouts informed Marek that they found a small Belgian corps. Marek decides she has time to smash this isolated corps before the rest of the Franco-Belgian armies could arrive. Commander Schuhaven sends an urgent message to Brussels garrison to hold off the Austrian rear, while Lehmann, Rousseau, and Vauban were to arrive as quickly as possible. Then he deployed his artillery behind wooded areas to screen his bombardment. Merrick was taking a huge risk. If this turned into a major battle, her army would be fighting from 3 directions. She also badly underestimated the speed of the Allied offensive, but she wouldn't have long to realize the magnitude of her mistake. Merrick was riding up to a nearby hill to survey the battle when Belgians began open firing and struck her with shellfire. The blow was fatal. Allied reinforcements arrived soon after, from the south, east, and west. Austrian leadership fell to Commander Neuhauser, ordering Bielstein to send reinforcements, then commanded his cavalry to attack the oncoming Belgian garrison. Vicious street fighting ensued. Many were cut down or fled, but the Belgians were able to fortify buildings in the outskirts, forcing the cavalry to fall back. To the south, cavalry reinforcements, led by General Vauban, charged the Austrian left flank to make way for artillery. The Austrians opened fire with devastating effect. Scores were mown down before they could reach the enemy. Only a countercharge by Rousseau's cavalry were able to reach, leading to bloody mortal combat. The cavalry gives way. The Austrian left break through to the French artillery, still moving into position. The arrival of the Austrians leads to chaos and confusion, but as more reinforcements arrive, they come under heavy fire, forcing a rapid withdrawal. To the east, General Lehmann was arriving in earnest, but was widely criticized for her overly cautious advance. The Austrians brought reinforcements of their own, deploying mortar batteries atop the heights to bombard the city. In a desperate charge, a small garrison covering a gentle ridge drove the enemy off the heights with bayonets fixed. At the Austrian center, Neuhauser maneuvers the army into a defensive position to hold out as long as possible for Bielstein to arrive. Vauban, having positioned the French army, ordered a general advance. Only a single Bosnian division was there to face them, in a defiant but doomed rearguard action. French cavalry and foreign legionnaires stormed the enemy artillery, paralyzing their operations, when they encountered the remnants of the Austrian cavalry. Austrian orders were too slow to keep up with the pace of the battle, making a difficult situation worse. As the Allies were closing in, the Austrian army became increasingly bunched up, allowing for Belgian artillery and machine gun fire to shoot onto them like fish in a barrel. The Austrians struck again and again, but the Allies were able to outmaneuver them at each turn. At 5 p.m., Neuhauser bowed to the inevitable, ordering a retreat back to Bielstein's approaching army. When the Austrians retreat north, the road became jammed with fleeing troops, trucks, and guns. The result was pandemonium, as the Austrian army fought their way to safety. The task of forming a rearguard fell to the Bosnian infantry divisions, who distinguished themselves earlier in the day. Vauban hoped Lehmann's Belgian army would be surging north to cut the Austrians' line of retreat. But Lehmann stuck to her cautious approach, as Bielstein's army began arriving in force. Positioning artillery atop the heights and ordering a seizing of the town of Kortenberg to counter the Belgian advance. Major fighting broke out as Belgian troops held off a numerically superior force. General Lehmann herself joined the defenses, bravely encouraging her men behind the front lines, even as her staff became seriously wounded. When the Austrian offensive withered, she then ordered her cavalry to flank at the Austrian artillery overlooking the Allies. But the rest of the enemy reinforcements arrived with overwhelming strength, forcing them to fall back. After clearing the Austrian center, Vauban commenced a second advance, commanded by General Rousseau, to drive back everything before him, with Belgium pinning down the right flank. Foreign legionnaires charged up the heights, meeting the Austrian defenses. At this moment, Rousseau was shot by artillery and killed instantly. But the advance continued. Both sides centered on claiming the heights. The Foreign Legion, even as their numbers dropped to less than 17, held off 600 Austrians till reinforcements could relieve them. At this hour, the Allied armies commenced an artillery barrage of all their batteries on the enemy. The result was devastating. The Austrian line became hard-pressed on both sides, amidst open fields, blocked roads, and oncoming fleeing troops. While the Allies are active, energized, urging themselves forward, Bielstein seems to have gone into battle shock. At 7 p.m., the French took the heights. Bielstein is in disarray, with part of her force fleeing in the wrong direction. News of the heights' capture and fear of encirclement sweep through the Austrian ranks. Panic breaks out, turning the retreat into a rout. Trucks and guns were abandoned amidst fleeing troops. Bielstein was nearly trampled, but many more killed or captured. The Allied advance teeters out, as French troops began looting not just supplies, but valuable Belgian works stolen by the Austrians on their way to Brussels. In Belgian popular memory, including Lehman herself, view this action as shameful, a nasty blemish on Belgian-French relations. But there was no dispute on the Austrians' terrible defeat. The Central Power offensive in the west was broken. The remnants of the Austrian army fell near Antwerp, where they laid down their arms and surrendered. It was the largest capture of any army since the Battle of Tannenberg, and was a costly victory for the Allies. French losses are estimated at 20,000 men. Belgian losses, 12,900. And the Austrians, a staggering 50,000 losses. Meanwhile, the Germans retook the Rhineland, cutting off a French army in Lower Saxony. The French in turn occupied Württemberg, and Italy capturing Munich. To the north, where a third Austrian army was to arrive, the disaster at Brussels forced them to withdraw to southern Germany. The Central Power offensive failed at driving the Allies out of Germany, but has crippled their advance northward. In popular memory, the Battle of Brussels was an unmitigated disaster and tragedy for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, evidence of the incompetency of Austrian generals. But across Europe, every warring nation was suffering terrible losses, as both sides struggled to adapt to modern warfare. And the French saved their Belgian ally and learned vital lessons on how to fight on the Western Front. It was a painful setback on the long road to victory. Thank you to all our kind patrons for their support. Visit the Sparks 360 Patreon page on how you too can contribute to my work and get early access to videos and art. Visit my Twitter for published artwork, Discord if you want to socialize, or check out my world building project, Epoch of Harmony. Liking this video and subscribing will also help this channel grow. Thanks for watching.